What's up, everyone? Sergeant Herbert here, and I think I found an okay editor. Apparently, there's one built into the computer I have, which is nice. I explored it for a bit. By the way, I just got done with that video that I made. Anyways, it seems okay. It's definitely not as good as Adobe Premiere Pro, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe the quality won't be, maybe the quality will be nice. That would eliminate one major thing. Anyways. Yeah, it's good. Today we're reacting to the timeline of world history, major time periods and ages, from useful charts. And one of you suggested that I react to this person. Yeah, I think I've watched them before, actually. Not this particular video, but they make videos about like family trees and all of that. It's pretty nice. What are you doing, Eclipse? But anyways, without further ado, let's get started.
Today I'm going to give you a very broad overview of human history. I'll be using the latest version of my timeline of world history chart, which is available as a poster from my website, usefulcharts.com.
That's cool.
In particular, I'm going to be showing you how history can be divided into various time periods or ages, and I'll be explaining how these divisions end up highlighting some of the most important turning points in world history.
By the way, just as a side note, have any of you all played Empire Earth? Because this really reminds me of Empire Earth. Empire Earth is like a really old game from 2001. It's like very nice, but it's completely forgotten about, even though it's like the best game ever, even in 2020. Oh, that got straight into it. Ooh, German Empire, look at that. Oh, Napoleon, look at that. Whoa, look at all those languages. So nice. Oh, the heck. Okay.
Let me start by explaining the basics of how this chart works.
Okay, explain.
The vertical scale represents the flow of time, with time moving forward as you move down the page. Every white line represents 100 years, and the scale is equidistant, which means that the distance between two lines near the top of the chart is exactly the same as it is near the bottom. This is important because it allows for accurate comparisons to be made, and thus gives the viewer a proper perspective on time. Horizontally, the various sections...
Because there's a lot of, like, time charts that, like, skip across a lot of time. Because back then, I guess, there wasn't as much happening. There wasn't as much technology. There wasn't as many people. So obviously there was a lot less action. So a lot of people, like, skip over thousands and thousands of years by making the years, further apart and stuff like that.
Of the chart represent different parts of the world. So on the far left, we have the Americas, followed by Africa, Europe, Asia, and finally the Pacific Islands.
What about Australia? Does that also mean the Pacific Islands?
Line on the chart represents a specific culture, civilization, or empire, and the width of the line represents the relative importance of that culture when compared to other cultures from the same time period or region.
Dang, look at Asia. They seem to be very important in the classical antiquity.
The next thing we need to talk about are the terms AD and BC, and their equivalents CE and BCE. AD means Anno Domini, which is Latin for in the year of the Lord. Basically, it's meant to measure the years from the birth of Jesus.
Yeah, I remember, like, I used to think it meant after death, since BC is before Christ, It seems like a lot of other people have the same, share the same thing.
Anything before that point is called BC, which stands for before Christ. Now, most scholars today have actually concluded that Jesus was probably born in 4 BC, so keep in mind that the scale is a bit off.
Yeah.
So as we move backwards through time, the AD dates go down, but then once we get to BC, the dates start going back up. And I should point out that there is no year zero. So basically, the year 1 BC was followed immediately by the year 1 AD. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more standard for historians to use the terms CE and BCE instead. CE stands for Common Era, and BCE stands for Before the Common Era. The reason for the change is simply an attempt to use a more neutral term, which makes sense.
I mean, I guess.
Considering that 75% of the world is not Christian.
I mean, yeah. I don't get why like other religions and stuff would get offended by that, you know. But I mean, I guess I see the reasoning.
Okay, now that we've got that under our belt, the next question.
Well, maybe it's not necessarily if they're offended by it or not. Like, I guess they just don't, you know. Like, like to them, it's just not a thing. Like, it doesn't make any sense to them.
We need to address is, what is the starting point for history? In other words,
well, probably when like writing was invented, or not necessarily writing, but like, yeah, I guess writing, because you know the first written records, because otherwise history would start at the very beginning of time.
Where do we draw the line between history and prehistory? Well, on this chart, I've used the year 3300 BCE as my starting point. Wow. The reason for this is that this is approximately when writing first appeared.
Okay, I was
The basic idea is that without written records, we can't have history.
Yeah,
Therefore,
that makes
everything
sense.
before the emergence of the first writing systems is best categorized as prehistory. And of course, prehistory goes back much farther than 5,300 years. If we're talking about the prehistory of our species, Homo sapiens, it goes back about another 200,000 years, a time period also known as the Stone Age. And if we're
Even that doesn't seem like that much, to be honest. Like, seriously, it seems like a lot to us, but there's species that have been around for millions of years. Like certain types of sharks, for example. Like, wow. And it's also interesting how we only started to really develop advanced technology, like, really recently.
we're talking about the prehistory of the planet Earth, well, that goes back about 4.5 billion years. But this chart doesn't cover prehistory. Instead, it starts with the emergence of written records and goes from there. So on this chart, history is divided into 6 main time periods. Early Bronze Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, Classical Antiquity, the Middle Ages, and the Modern Period. Let's now take a...
Wow, the modern period is really small. Why? Wow, so... Oh, that's interesting. At first I was gonna ask why they didn't include like the Renaissance or anything like that. Or, but that makes sense because it's like a really small period of time.
Take a look at each, one by one. The Bronze Age gets its name based on the fact that humans first started to make things out of bronze around the same time that they first developed writing. This occurred in 3 main areas.
Also, just real quick, imagine how long this would have taken to make, like, this whole chart. Like, seriously, I'm impressed by whoever spent the time. It was probably like a large group of people, but seriously, that must have taken forever.
Egypt.
So look in the background. There's like a map in the background. It's so interesting.
Sumer, which is modern-day Iraq.
I guess, but also, you know, Kuwait too, and part of Iran.
And the Indus Valley,
Iran,
modern-day Pakistan. Unfortunately, the writing system used in the Indus Valley is yet to be deciphered. So we can only read the records from Egypt and Sumer. But
we still haven't deciphered the Indus River. That is interesting.
We these three civilizations did trade with one another, and that throughout the early Bronze Age, each grew in terms of both size and technology. At the start of this period, the Sumerians had already invented the wheel, the plow, and the sail. But during
Yeah, the Sumerians, they were amazing. They like invented so much stuff. I think they invented the sailboat too. And they also invented writing.
the early Bronze Age, they also went on to develop astronomy and mathematics. Over
Oh
in
wow.
Egypt, it was during the early Bronze Age that the Great Pyramids of Giza were built. Besides
Very
these
nice.
three civilizations, the only other place in the world to have large cities was over in what is today Peru. There, a cult
Oh yeah, the people of the thing, you know. The people of the thing. Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because um they would write, I mean, they would like have they would communicate or have like written language or whatever, not with like words and pictographs and all of that. They would use like strings, and the way that they were knotted and stuff and how the strings looked would determine what they said. So it is very, very cool.
culture known as the Norte Chico civilization was thriving. But strangely, although they built large stone structures, they appear to have had no writing system and no pottery. Stone structures dating from the early Bronze Age
I just said that they did have. Well, I guess it's not really a
which
writing
can also be
system.
found at Stonehenge in England and on the island of Malta, but neither of these places had large populations. Okay, so that was the early Bronze Age. Now let's look at the Bronze Age
What?
proper.
Come on,
Dividing
corpse.
these two
What are you
time
doing?
periods is a very important event known as the 4.2 kiloyear event, named because it occurred approximately 4.2 thousand years ago. The exact cause of the event is still debated, but what we do know is that it resulted in approximately 100 years of extremely dry conditions worldwide. Because of this,
What?
the Egyptian Old Kingdom, the Akkadian Empire, which had conquered Sumer,
Yeah,
and
big
the
sad.
Indus Valley civilization all declined rapidly. And in the
Wow.
time period that
It's actually interesting is that Sumer would come back with the new name, this new Neo-Sumerian Empire, and they would conquer like almost all of Mesopotamia. Like they came back with a vengeance. Seriously, they were not. Yeah, it's crazy.
followed, we get a new set of cultures.
Hmm.
Egypt was revived as the Middle and New Kingdoms, and the Sumerian civilization eventually evolved into the Babylonian civilization.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure what happened was like they were eventually after their huge expansion under the Neo-Sumerian Empire, they were conquered and they were like split up into two different puppet states. One of them was a completely different name, and another one was Sumer, and it was a puppet state of someone else, like Assyria or something like that. I don't remember exactly. Then what happened was they came back. They they changed their name to Babylonia, and then they conquered like Mesopotamia again. So yeah, good job, like Sumerians. That was amazing. Conquered Mesopotamia like twice.
But in South Asia, we get a more dramatic change. The Indus Valley cities disappear altogether, and we get a new set of people arriving.
Yeah, they
the
say it's because of like a
Indo-Aryans,
flood
who
or
were part of
something.
the larger Indo-European group. During the
Hmm.
Bronze Age proper,
Okay, I keep stopping it, and I'm sorry. This video is going to take forever. I promise I'm not going to stop it that much anymore. But well, who cares? Y'all can just skip it. But anyways, it's so annoying how like because okay, so the Aryans people have this weird thing where they say, oh yeah, the Aryans were like blonde hair and blue eyes. They looked like me, Rocco Argybright. But no, that's not what the Aryans were. The Aryans are from like that region in like South Asia, in the Middle East. That region, somewhere around there. Like no, they're the Aryans. the Nazis never even like talked about the Aryans, and I don't even think they used the word Aryan at all, like or its German equivalent or whatever. I don't, I'm curious about where this whole misconception came from.
We also get civilizations arising in other parts of the world for the first time,
Minoans.
including in China, sub-Saharan Africa, and
Oh, yeah, sub-Saharan Africa used to actually be green. By green, I mean it used to be habitable, and there was like big seas and stuff, and people actually lived there.
unbeknownst to many people, North America. There we get the Poverty
Really?
Point culture, where
Poverty
large
Point.
mounds and complex settlements were built.
Huh.
Finally, we also get the first civilization in Europe, the Minoans on the island of Crete.
Yeah.
Midway through the period, though, there was a volcanic eruption nearby, which led to the downfall of the Minoans and the rise of the Mycenaean Greeks instead. This catastrophe could very well have been the event that birthed the Atlantis myth. The next
Really? That is cool. That is a very interesting theory.
big turning point in history occurred around 1200.
And the Minoans, they were so advanced for their time. They had like huge palaces with like plumbing and all of that. It was so advanced that whenever the Mycenaeans or whatever they're called, Mycenaeans or whatever, whenever they conquered Crete and found all of the ruins, they thought that the that it was that one of the palaces or something like that was the actual maze in the whole Minotaur myth story thing. Very interesting.
BCE, and it is known as the Bronze Age
Oh
collapse.
no!
For reasons that are still somewhat unclear,
No.
the major civilizations in Greece, Anatolia, and Egypt all disappeared almost instantaneously. What followed is often
Egypt didn't disappear though.
called the Greek Dark Ages, a period in which the historical record for the region goes somewhat silent. Interestingly, it is during this silent period that many of the world's most famous legendary tales supposedly took place.
Oh yeah, the thing, the Homer's thing. Oh, probably says it right there.
Such as those found in the Jewish Torah, the Greek
really?
Iliad, and the Hindu Mahabharata.
What's it called? Homer's The Odyssey. No, I think it's actually just called The Odyssey. Yeah.
The Bronze Age collapse also coincided with the first use of iron in the Middle East. Therefore,
Really?
the period in
Wow.
which the Greek Dark Ages took place is also aptly called the Iron Age. This is the third and final period in what is known as the Three Age system, consisting of the
What?
Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. The next period is not actually part of the Three Age system. This is because after approximately 600 BCE, we no longer have to rely entirely on archaeology to get information. As I mentioned earlier, humans have been writing since 3300 BCE, but there is nothing surviving from the Bronze Age or Iron Age that could really be considered a history book. Sure, we have the names
Really?
of kings, lists of battles, and other details carved into rock and metal, but we don't have anything that starts with, in this treatise, I am going to record the complete history of X. But
Oh, and this is this where the end of the Three Ages is? Well, I mean, probably should have not taken me that long to figure it out, but yeah.
around this time, we do start to get such writings. For example, from a Greek guy named Herodotus, who is often called the father of history. So in other words, we know a heck of a lot more information about this next period, called classical antiquity, than we know about the previous periods. Classical antiquity is when the Greeks and the Romans laid the foundations for what would become known as Western civilization, mostly by borrowing and building upon information gained from the earlier Bronze Age civilizations.
Yeah.
But there was a lot going on in other parts of the world as well. For example, in Mesoamerica, Olmec culture would go on to influence classical Mayan culture
Yeah.
with its intricate calendar and writing system. And in North America, there was an extensive trade network where lots of different types of art was being exchanged. In Africa, the long-standing kingdom of Kush eventually gave way to the kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia. There was also
What about the Egyptians? Are they still around? I don't see the Egyptians. Oh no. Oh yeah, Rome conquers them. Rome conquers them. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Greece conquers them. And then they come back, and then Rome conquers them again.
the three mighty Persian empires, the Maurya and Gupta empires in India, and the first imperial
3 Persian empires. Wow.
dynasty in China. Eventually, a trade route between all these areas opened up,
Silk
known
Road.
as the Silk
Yeah.
Road, and thus the western parts of
I think this is also the time where the Great Wall of China is built.
Eurasia and the eastern parts of Eurasia were connected
Or not, actually. Could have been later.
for the first time.
No, actually, it's around this time.
But perhaps even more importantly, it was during classical antiquity that humanity's current moral and philosophical foundations were laid. Simultaneously, yet independently, we got Greek philosophy, the Bible, the Hindu and Buddhist scriptures, and the writings of Confucius. We also saw the first experiments with democracy and the first evidence of truly scientific thinking. But this golden age of human development did not last forever.
Oh no. Look, there's gonna be another Dark Ages. Look down there. Look at that. Look! There's gonna be another Dark Ages.
Came to an end around the year 500 CE with the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In other areas, the classical period ended a little earlier, such as in China, or a little later, like in Mesoamerica. But basically, all over the world, most of the major classical civilizations eventually crumbled. We then get what's called the Middle Ages. The word middle is used for this period because it is located in the middle between ancient history, which consists of everything we've covered so far, and modern history, which we'll be getting to next. It's also called the medieval period, medieval simply meaning Middle Age. But one term that really shouldn't be used for the medieval period, but often is the Dark Ages. The reason for this is that the so-called Dark Ages were really just limited to Western Europe. Other areas during this time, such as the Middle East and China, were actually experiencing new golden ages. So what made things in Western Europe change so drastically? Well, numerous theories have been put forward, but one thing we know for certain is that it involved large-scale migrations in several parts of the world. Whether or not these migrations were sparked by climate change or some other natural phenomena, we can't be sure. But it ended up creating kind of a domino effect. For example, the Huns moved.
Oh yeah, like that's the reason why the Western Roman Empire ended up collapsing.
Moved into Europe from the east, and this pushed several Germanic tribes south, bringing them into conflict with Rome. Eventually, it was these Germanic tribes, known to the Romans as barbarians, who caused the fall of the Western Empire and plunged Europe into the so-called Dark Ages. But it wasn't just barbarians that caused trouble. In the years 5...
Oh yeah, I actually have a fun fact about the Minoans. Or maybe it's the Mycenaeans, I'm pretty sure it's the Minoans. What they would or some kind of Greek people, whatever. Anyways, they made pretty much anyone who didn't speak Greek was a barbarian to them. And they sort of made fun of barbarians by saying bar 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 bar. And that's where we get, the term barbarians from. Pretty sure. Yeah, that's why it's always used in like those, those strange country ball comics on the internet.
535 and 536, there were several extreme weather events, perhaps started by a large
I can't
volcanic
see.
eruption, that led to
I
famines
can't see.
and cool, dry
PJ.
weather all over the world. There was also the first bubonic plague, also known as the Plague of Justinian, that killed 50% of the population in some cities. In the East, these events did not lead to the eastern half of the empire falling, but they did set the stage for the rise of a new civilization nearby, Islam.
Oh,
But while Islam was expanding in the Middle East,
ow!
Christianity was
Ow!
expanding in Europe.
Ow!
Eventually, areas that started out as barbarian kingdoms evolved into major
Oh
powers such as
yeah.
England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire. But there
So interesting to think that you know, Germany and France and England, I mean Britain or whatever, and they were barbarians. And even Russians, I think, they were, considered barbarians. But now they're some of the strongest in the world. That's so, and now, Italy is, they're just, they're still trying to, they're still like on par with them when they used to be super powerful and could pretty much just push them around.
There were lots of other things happening in the world during the Middle Ages as well. For example, in West Africa, we get several major empires for the first time,
Hmm.
including the Mali Empire, with its ruler Mansa Musa, who was the richest person ever in all of world history.
Ah, what? How is
And
that?
in southern
How do you miss? That's interesting.
Africa, there was the city of Great Zimbabwe, which included the first large structures ever in that part of the world. A lot was happening in the Americas as well. We don't tend to think of cities existing in pre Columbian North America, but they did. There
Yeah.
was Cahokia in what is now Illinois, as well as the Puebloan cities in New Mexico. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs were dominating, and in South America, there were the Incas. Finally, it
I'm actually very impressed about how much land the Incas and the Aztecs actually had, and it's so unfortunate that they were attacked at the time that they did. Like, if they were attacked like 50 years earlier, they would have been a lot better, the Incas and the Aztecs, from the Europeans. Because the Incas, they just finished with the huge civil war, like right whenever the Europeans came. And the Aztecs, they were in a state of decline at the time whenever the Europeans came. And they had a bunch of different puppets that weren't even loyal to them. Yeah.
was during the Middle Ages that we get the largest land empire of all time, the Mongol Empire, started
Oh.
by Genghis Khan. Okay, we now come to the sixth and final time
Dang, we got far. It's so well.
period,
Interesting.
the modern age, which is the period in which we live today. One could argue that the transition started with the most deadly pandemic of all time, the Black Death, also known as the second bubonic plague. Once again, up to 50% of
Well, if you're going to consider the Western Roman Empire falling as the beginning of the Middle Ages, I would consider the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, as the beginning of the modern period. It makes sense, because that's also the exact time when the Renaissance starts happening. But anyways,
the population in many cities passed away, and this perhaps helped spark the Renaissance. The Eastern Roman
really,
Empire finally
well, I guess that makes sense. It did. I guess it did help start the Renaissance in some ways.
fell to the Ottoman Turks, and in Italy there was a renewed interest in studying the art and philosophy of the classical period. Around the same time, Europeans started colonizing the Americas, and major advances were made in science. This in turn led to the Industrial Revolution, which then gave way to the Technological Revolution, which we are still experiencing today.
Hmm.
Okay, so that was obviously a very broad overview.
Yeah.
But what I think is perhaps most interesting and most important are the similarities that can be seen in the transitions between each time period. Often they involve a
Notice how it gets more and more complex, with more and more lines as we go through.
combination of climate events, mass migrations, and pandemics. Three things that we are currently dealing with in the year 2020. Does this mean that we are on the verge of entering a new period in human history?
It was made in
I
2020.
guess only time will tell. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks.
Yeah, that kind of sucks. Like they finally finished their huge like world history project, and then a bunch of different things in the world start happening. These really crazy historic things, like all at the same time. I don't know. It kind of sucks. But anyways, that was a great video. It really was. Yeah, just make sure to like and subscribe. I don't know if I'm gonna do an outro, so yeah. This is my outro pretty much. The whole reason why I even have an outro that I edit is because I'm bad at doing outros like I'm doing right now. Okay, I need to stop. Goodbye. Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. And turn on the notification bell thingy. And if you didn't, then make sure to leave a thumbs down. But yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. And while you're at it, go ahead and watch my other videos. They're probably just as good, and if not better than this one right now. Except for my oldest videos, don't watch those. And, subscribe to these people down here, my fellow sergeants. They're other YouTubers that I either know or I have in high regards. Yeah, even my cat agrees. So, thank you for watching, and have a great day.